Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for stopping by. This nice, it's actually a really nice Saturday here. We can get right into it. Housekeeping things are kind of this week. The last stream will be going up on YouTube, and along with all the other past streams that you can watch there, so you weren't able to catch any of them live. And then today we are joined by Matt Brown, a past coworker and a good friend of mine who is also a 3D artist here in New York. And we can jump over and say what's up. Hey, how you doing?
What's up?
What's up? You have such a curated background there. It's like the nice, elegant chair, the guitar perfectly placed in frame so people know.
This isn't
Plants.
this isn't planned, by the way. This is just how I live.
Is always that like perfectly clean. Just
Yeah, man. Well,
everything.
I've just moved in, so this is
I
this
guess
is it.
that's, yeah. You haven't
Yeah,
had time to do anything else, but
no,
yeah,
exactly. If I move the camera around, it's just chaos over here.
just boxes and boxes and unpacked things.
No, it's actually not too bad. It's all
That's
right.
nice. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining me here. Um, but we can kind of just jump right into it. Introduce you, obviously Matt Brown, but can kind of say what you do, who you are, and that kind of stuff, and then we can roll into some of the just other stuff
Yeah,
later on.
for sure. Yeah. So my name is Matt. I am British, but I live in New York City, and I've been here for 3.5 years now, which has gone very quickly. I would describe myself as a 3D generalist. I do a bit of everything, to be honest. I've sort of tried to build a career just trying to be as useful as I can in the studios I work at. So this is where I'm going to try and get a bit background with you, and I'll show my age as well. So I I graduated in 2005 from a university in the UK, and I studied product design. Um, and then I sort of left there, and then I went to London, and I was lucky enough to get into a studio, a packaging and branding agency called Design Bridge, and I was there as on a placement. Is how I started, and I just kind of built up from there. And I kind of, it was very lucky actually. They were very good with me, and they kind of gave me the opportunity to try a bunch of different things, so I could work out what I liked. I think like now I would my job title is a 3D visualizer. I think back then I had no idea what that was, or
Right.
even if it was a thing. Like no one did a course for 3D visualization back in 2005. Maybe they do now. I don't know, but they didn't
I think everything has a course at this point. Like I'm always shocked
then.
at like how niche and widespread different things are, and like
Yeah,
pretty available for, yeah, any kind of course you want to go down. But I definitely, yeah, I was, yeah, 2005 was like way before I'd even like started thinking about any of that. So I can
that's right.
imagine like,
You were probably about two at that point.
no, I was definitely, what was I was 10. So
Perfect. Yeah, so I did that, and I worked at the design which I think I was there for 13 years in the end. But I was sort of jumping around initially, and I was working like they let me go in the graphics studio for a bit, and then they put me in where was I? I was doing they had like a 3D team as well, so they did a lot of structural stuff. When I say structural stuff, it was like not product design, but packaging design, which kind of bleeds into everything, sort of leans into each other. So I sort of jumped around there a little bit, and then I kind of I don't know. They had a station that had Studio Max on it, I think it was at the time,
hmm,
and I was just messing around with some CAD models that someone else had built. I think it was like washing up or something, and I just sort of made some visuals out of that. And yeah, one of the creative directors was like, "Whoa, you can make stuff," and I was like, "Yeah, I can do that."
yeah.
And they kind of rolled from there. I mean, they had a visualization team, but everything back then was just Photoshop. To be honest, it was
Hmm.
like everything was a sketch, and then you take it into Photoshop and just sort of airbrush it. So it's been an interesting transition from going from the Photoshop stuff into the 3D stuff. Now predominantly it's 3D, but back then it was very much Photoshop heavy,
I mean, I
which,
think that's
which is
probably
good
a
in a
good
way.
base. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it kind of gave me a background in sort of retouching and being able to understand shapes and forms, and trying to work out where the shadows go and where the highlights hit, that kind of stuff. It all kind of lends itself to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I was there for a long time, and then 3.5 years ago, I got a new job, and I moved to New York for another packaging uh, branding agency called Pearl Fisher, and I was there for a year, and then I sort of jumped to JKR, which is where I am now, and I've been here for 2.5 years now, which is again gone really
Yeah.
fast. But yeah, it's great. I mean, you know, it's an interesting, it's a constantly evolving, fast moving uh, world. It's packaging and branding.
Right.
Yeah, it's good. I enjoy it anyway. It has its moments, but keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of. I mean, JCAR is where we met, and you were like added on to a team as one of the visualizers left, and then you kind of filled that spot. Um, and that was my like I before I was like even because I hadn't worked in the ad agency world at all before JKR, and so I was like, oh wow, there's like a specific guy for like stills, like making photoreal stills, and then there's us that are like we can get close. We can get like pretty decent visuals, but like it's got to
Yeah,
be moving. Like we can't take the time to kind of do like the picture perfect like Photoshop on top of the render to like exactly what like client needs are. And that's where I was like always impressed by like you and like other visualizers where I was like, wow, like that's insane amount of detail where I was always like like that's like we can get it close and it'll like look decent, and then like we're also focusing on like motion and other stuff, but then like I and the person kind of before you had like pretty much only done stills, but then you were also like, I mean, I do motion too, and I was like, oh wow, like you don't just like do this like because you can get people that are pretty specialized in like just visualizing it and just stills, but you're like a true generalist in the terms of like pretty wide variety of like what you were able to do, which I always like thought was cool because you could still speak the language of like things that we were doing and kind of still build stuff that we could use was kind of always the battle. Was like visualizers kind of built it in a very specific way, and you're like, oh well, this you move the camera 2 inches to the right and like it falls apart as like a render, and then it's like, but a lot of your stuff was kind of like built in a similar fashion to kind of with the knowledge behind that. So like when did you kind of, because you started kind of Photoshop, then like 3ds Max, ended up in cinema at some point.
sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, cinema
So
came
like
into it.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, cinema came into it actually pretty soon after I sort of. I guess I've been using cinema for 13 years, I guess now,
Oh wow.
around
What
about.
what when did you start in? Was
Oh
our
God, man,
bef-
Christ.
in the
I can't.
teens probably? Yeah, I would say.
Probably, yeah. It was a ways back, but it was even before. It wasn't obviously physical. It wasn't even around at that point. I think it was just like a. Man, God, I wish I should have done some research. Yeah, I'm not sure which version it was. It was way before MoGraph. I know that.
Oh
Uh,
wow, so you're probably before
yeah,
teens because I think I jumped in at 14, and that was
yeah. It was,
2013. So yeah, definitely would have been
I want to
before.
say 7 or 8. I think
Oh yeah,
around that
yeah,
area. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was all standard at that point, and it was just getting something out and then photoshopping on top of it, like because the Photoshop was still predominantly what we used in that studio at the time. So I would render something out, and then I don't know, let me put into percentages for you. I think I would probably get something 50% there in 3D, because at the time as well, like in this industry, everything has to happen like immediately,
right,
almost everything straight away. So there's not a lot of time to do stuff. So I would get something as close as I could, and then I would take it into Photoshop and just do the rest. A lot of the time that was color, that was putting labels on stuff. It was just doing
oh wow,
some
labels
odd finishes.
in Photoshop, not even in
Well,
3D.
yeah, it was just so happened that as you probably experienced at JKI, is that everything happens last minute
Mm.
and things are subject to change. So if you can't take the time to render something out nicely, it was always going to change, like
Wow.
half an hour before the presentation. So everything had to be just as quick and as easy to change as possible. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, cinema sort of. I can't even remember how I learned it. I guess it was all just kind of, Grayscale Gorilla and that kind of thing. And just trying to use tutorials, and I was very lucky because in that studio there was like a range of people as well. We had like a full team of people. So there was like motion designers, visualizers, 3D structural designers, and and we even had like a model maker actually. So it was like proper sort of closed loop thing. So we would
Mm.
do the whole design system, and then there's a studio downstairs where we sat, and then there was the graphic designers upstairs. So it's just I don't know, it was fun to be a part of because you got to see the whole process.
Hmm.
So you never really lost sight of what was happening at any one time. Everything was always there. And also, we were all kind of all in it together because everyone was learning this 3D stuff at the same time.
Right.
So it was very useful to be part of a team, and everyone was helping each other out. If you had a problem, you could ask someone. Someone might know, someone might not know. Just
Right.
jump in and just try it.
Do you,
But yeah, and then yeah, then what physical came along at one point. I think we were just using team render and everything just to try and get everything out on time.
yeah.
All that stuff.
Do you think kind of having access to like a lot of different people in that kind of closed like pipeline like helped you become more of a generalist because you could kind of pull like just knowledge from like people around you in different like aspects of all of it? Because I mean now like you mentioned like model making, like motion design, like
Mm.
you seem to be able to like still touch on a lot of those like a high proficiency. So do you think that like working in that kind of space geared you to be more of a generalist, or did kind of the industry requiring generalists kind of gear you to be a generalist? Mix of
No,
both.
I think maybe a little bit of both, but I think uh, probably the fact that I was in a room full of people who did different things, and there was always a bit of crossover. And I think I always found it important to sort of try and be useful. I think I mentioned that earlier, but like I just wanted to make sure that I could be helpful to along every step of the way.
Hmm.
So, there was the guys who were using After Effects, and I wanted to know what the best way was that I could help them out by bringing something in 3D, or if I could pick up a better After Effects and work out how to use it, then I could, be useful further along the line.
Right.
Uh, and then, yeah, there was the 3D guys, and I learned a bit of CAD. At one point, I was learning Alias, so if you know that software, like
Mm-mm.
3D software, like
Yeah.
modeling software. It's used predominantly for cars. It's quite an old one now, but
Mm.
I did a few courses on that. Um, and it's just trying to learn as much as you can, and just yeah, like I say, just be useful in that studio environment. I think in terms of I never wanted to get bored or
Right.
or sit still.
Hmm.
So just if I saw someone doing something cool, I kind of want to know how they did it.
Right.
Not just because it was something I might be able to take off them, but it's because so I could help them
Right.
essentially.
I
And
think
yeah,
that.
we had like the model making was also super useful to see how that works. And then we also had a photography studio in the basement, which also helped with like working out how lights worked, all that stuff. It seems really obvious, I guess, when you think back on it, but I think it all helps make you into a fully rounded generalist.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, especially kind of photography side of it really informs kind of a lot of stuff because you can kind of replicate it exactly, or like like when a creative director comes in, he's like, we just need that like little bit of shine on the side. You're like, you know, I
Mm.
mean, today's standards, you could just be someone who's like just been running and gunning with H's your eyes, and you're like, oh no, I have no idea how to like rotate or edit this like 3D, 360 image. But like if you're kind of more based in kind of traditional photography, you could be like, oh yeah, you would just throw up a card there, and like it'll definitely be
Yeah.
fine.
Well, I made it. I actually remember like just asking my old boss, creative director at the time, a guy called Ed. I was just like, "Can I just go on some photo shoots?" And, because they sent out shoots for pack shots. So a lot of it was food, a lot of it was just glassware, that kind of thing. But just going into a photography studio and just seeing, it sounds dumb, but just seeing how big a softbox is,
Mm,
like just things like that, and working out where people put them and how close the camera is to the product, what lens they're using,
right.
all the little bits like that. It just, you know, it's amazing how close photography is to 3D. Like,
Hmm.
what if you set everything up to scale? It kind of looks, you can get everything to look very similar. So I
Right.
think it's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Anyone who's
And
trying to learn it is to, to have a look at photography.
I think that that is kind of what excited me a bit once that kind of clicked as well, because the fact that 3D can break a lot of those traditional kind of handicaps
Mm,
that photography has to use can sometimes like mislead you in like how things should happen. Because like right, you can have a really small, really powerful softbox, or a really big, really dim one, where in kind of traditional formats it's like you can't just order, I mean, to my knowledge, like you normally just don't order like a custom sized softbox. Like they're pretty standard, like how
yeah,
big these are going to
yeah,
be, how far away they're going to be, how much like output you can put like intensity wise before like you burn the cover of the softbox. Like there's just all these limitations, you know, it
Hmm.
can't be in the shot, so you got to put a card. Like why is there, you know, and you're just like kind of trying, like I remember a lot of that was like, you know, you'd see what was shot in like in a studio, and then they'd be like, we would like, you know, this is the reference for 3D, and you're like trying to pick apart, like I have no idea like what happened here, like maybe there was a black card under it and that's why like it's like darker down there, and like there's
Yeah.
not the reflection that you would think would carry through, and just all that different stuff. And then yeah, I think even like at some of the studios there was like they would just do like for archive purposes, like this was the setup, and it'd be like, oh my goodness, I would never in a million years guess that those things were placed there, and that's like how the
Totally.
photo turned out. So that's,
Yeah.
it's really cool that they kind of encouraged and like let you, they realized the connection of like you weren't just trying to like get away from your desk for a bit, you were like, I
No.
need to like know this, and this is like useful information for me.
It was honestly fascinating. Like the biggest thing for me, like you just mentioned, was like just seeing how they set it up and then the actual photograph. And like honestly, the biggest turning point was working out that the final shot wasn't just one photograph.
Mm,
Like that, like I spent so long just trying to get like one bottle to look right in one shot. And then like I was again quite lucky because we had like a bunch of retouchers and they would, do the comping of everything. And like the final shot could have been anything up to like 13, 14 different shots all put together just to get that bit that they needed. And then it was
mm,
all just comped. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I don't need to get this all in one render. I can just render out a section of one bit and a section of another bit and do the lighting separately and then get to that final point. Um, and that was amazing knowledge to have actually. It's pretty powerful stuff. But I mean that's all very well, but in an industry where everything moves really quickly, half the time you don't get opportunity to do 13, 14 renders and then
right,
put them all together. Everything has to happen
right.
very quickly. So, it's good to know. And there are ways of managing it. I think it's once you find out a process and say a bottle visual, which, I do a lot of bottle visuals, trying to move away from bottle visuals, but I do a lot of them. But, once you know how to light one, generally speaking, you can take that principle and roll it across other bottle visuals.
Right.
It kind of works. But like there was a point in time where I just remember seeing someone they were taking a photograph of a glass bottle, and then they had it on like a piece of glass to capture that reflection of the base, and then they took another shot of it on like a dull black surface just to get uh, like no reflections on the actual bottle itself. And I'm like, wow, okay, these two different shots, same lights, it looks so different.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would just sort of blend between the two. And it's little things like that, but it's like, okay, understood. Like you say, you can break it in freedom. There are
Right.
ways of cheating things. So
Yeah, and
you
I
can,
think
pick lights and turn lights off and
yeah,
shadows and stuff, and it's helpful.
right. Yeah, I think it's finding or like knowing where those or why those are there, and then
Mm.
knowing like when you can start to like break it. Or like yeah, like you don't actually need that. You could, you know, make an invisible thing to catch reflections, turn off, you know, bounce reflections to the bottle and that sort of thing. And it's like cool. Now you can all do it in one render. Don't need two different renders to like. Especially, I think the biggest part is like when this like in our world or kind of goes into motion. It's like you just can't do 13 renders, like that is just
Yeah.
impractical. So you have to kind of like, you know, pick your battles, figure out what you can do. And then the other thing, I don't know if you kind of came across this, is like retouching to photo is just a pretty different process than like comping a
Yeah.
render, just because like they don't have the passes, so they're like doing some like pretty crazy tricks to like, you know, capture highlights in certain areas where it's like, oh, that's our, you know, it's a reflection pass. Like I remember talking to a retoucher that we both know, Simon, and he was kind of like shocked or like impressed that like things that he like was like pulling teeth to like figure out how to like section off the certain thing or a highlight somewhere. It's like, it's just a pass we kick out and like sometimes don't even use. He's like, oh my goodness, like that would be like life changing to be able to like have passes, and figuring out, you know, different tricks from them of like where you can, you know, use those inside to get kind of the similar results, but not have to do a bunch of like tedious kind of retouching on top of it because you get it with passes. But
Yeah.
I think that all that is cool to base kind of, and it helps just push towards photorealism because that's how they're shooting it in the real world. If you kind of base it off that and then expand into 3D, it's definitely going to have a good base start and like look good just kind of out of the box, and then you can kind of move forward into kind of, you know, breaking it in the 3D terms or motion terms.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of those things that I still haven't got my head around yet is how to, a lot of people do. I don't do a lot of motion. I don't do as much motion as I'd like to do, but it's the next step for me is trying to do more animation, but then trying to comp those passes in sort of animation software.
Mm.
Uh, Probably not Nuke. That's probably slightly over my head at this point, but I'll probably stick with After Effects and just see where we get, see where we
Yeah,
land.
people are very gung ho both ways, but I just find,
Yeah,
if you're in Photoshop, Illustrator, and Cinema, After Effects just seems pretty easy to pick up. Whereas Nuke, I feel like if you're really into Houdini, Nuke will probably be like pretty easy for you to pick up. But if you're
yeah,
like coming from kind of Photoshop, but I mean, each person learns differently. It's all based on the needs. Seems like overkill probably just for some small motion tests to be doing your full comp pipeline, but some people do.
yeah. No, I just think After Effects is probably the way forward. Just like because it's an industry standard in my industry anyway. So
Yeah,
it's very. It would probably be too much to do something in Nuke, learn Nuke, do something in Nuke, and then no one knows how to change it.
right.
It's
And
it's
probably not at the
important to
studio. You can't really convince them when they already have Creative Cloud to
yeah.
buy a whole new software. Um, Someone's saying, good day. Love the chat. Thanks. Yeah. So we can kind of move into. Oh, I did want to ask.
Mm.
You started Design Bridge. Were there for like a good amount of time. Like rose up. Did you do any like internships or like where did you go to university for design at all, or how did you kind of get into that first position at
Um,
Design Bridge?
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I did product design at university. So I did 3 years of that at a place called Rochester, in the UK. And to be honest, the course I was on wasn't amazing. It
Hmm.
was much more like it was just basic stuff, and it was a few Photoshop courses. I think there was like a Form Z. Do you remember that? Like a 3D
Mm-mm.
software. Is that still a thing?
I don't know.
But yeah,
Maybe.
it's a very old basic 3D software. So people were using that, and it was it was like it was full service. So you learn how to draw, how to use marker pens, a
Uh,
bit of Photoshop, and then there was also like a woodwork kind of
oh.
uh, place where you could go and make models. It was like
Mm-hmm.
there's a vacuum machine and stuff. It was all pretty basic stuff, but it was a case of designing something and then making a model of it. It's kind of what it was. Yeah, and then I just sort of lent way more into the visualization side of things before I even knew what it was. So my
Mm-hmm.
entire portfolio was made up of these, which looking back, they were products, but they were also probably packaging with branding elements to it. So where I ended up, it kind of makes sense.
Right.
Um, and I was just very lucky that when I left, I just basically sent out my portfolio to so many places, and Design was picked up on it. And I went in there, like they got me in on it was a placement. They were very, very good to me. They sort of at the time I sort of still lived at home after university, and they paid for my train ticket in every day. I was doing
Oh
that,
wow.
the classic 2 hour commute
Mm.
from where I lived on the coast into London every day, like 2 hours there, 2 hours back,
Wow.
and it was and then they paid for the train fare. They gave me like a little bit of cash, and I just sort of turned up every day and just tried to absorb as much as I could. And then they gave me a full-time job as what they call a studio junior. I don't know if there's an equivalent to that in the US. It's like a full-time kind of intern, but you just pick up odd jobs.
Hmm.
So again, I'm going to date myself, but like this is the time when all presentations were kind of done on foam board. You go to the plotter, you print out a massive roll, and then you have to cut it all out and spray it. And it was madness, to be honest. But it was good. And then I just kind of jumped into the 3D bit and the Photoshop bit, and I just kind of went from there, and it just sort of gradually grew. Timing wise, it was pretty lucky because it was around about that time that people were starting to realize that you didn't have to. I mean, you could make a very quick visual from 3D software, and you could change it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for me, it's just in the right place at the right time with a team I had at the time as well. There's a guy called Ed he was the he's fine, what he is now. He's probably like executive something or other there, but he was a 3D modeler who used Alias, and he built everything very perfectly. When you look at packaging, you just kind of take it for granted, but
Mm-hmm.
he was very precise. So he would do all of the modeling, you know, I always found it fascinating that you could build a bottle and and roll it out across various different sizes and do all the voluming, and then that CAD data would get sent to the basement, and you'd come up with this, you know, before 3D printing, you'd mill it all out of foam, and you'd have all these models and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a fascinating process. So I was just very lucky to be part of that, and sort of grow with that studio. And there was a point in time where there was quite a lot of people there, you know, and then motion guys came into it, and they started doing a lot more, started doing the brand movies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, turned into a bit more of a motion graphics kind of place. I'm not entirely sure what they're doing nowadays, but at the time, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like, just kind of sort of similar trajectory where it's like, you know, you got like just a taste of like design in general and like soft skills that like are always helpful, like drawing and just like I think the most thing that I kind of got out of it, where it's like my college was also small and also not extremely like cutting edge in like, you know, when I was going to school, like there definitely were colleges that were like, you know, churning out just like super high end, like the student reel was like pretty comparable with like, you know, studio reels from different places like SCAD or places like that, where ours was, you know, not quite at that level, just due to the size and like the talent they could get back in, you know, Michigan to teach at the school. But it kind of just gave you like soft skills, but also let you kind of just explore ideas and just like kind of get that like itch out of like there were projects to finish, and like you had to like realize like, oh, here's like time management on like how long it takes me to concept something or different things like that I think that are always useful. Definitely don't have to go to school for, but that's kind of where I liked it. I was like, oh yeah, like it did like kind of subconscious soft skills throughout that carry over that you know I wouldn't have done on my own probably, and
But
like
that's
figured
it.
out.
Yeah, it's just if you're in that environment with other people who are also trying to figure it out, I think that helps. And you know, I
Mm-hmm.
still carry that. I think in a way you do as well. It's like to be part of a team has always been like really important to me. Just because I think I get so much more out of being in a room with other like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, you know, graphic design is great, but if it's people who are also into 3D or motion graphics, you know, whatever, that's my that's my favorite part, is just to be in that room,
Right.
just throw ideas around, and if you know, just to see how stuff happens, because if you can miss so much in a creative studio if you're not there.
Right.
Um, I mean, I should caveat by saying I'm not really up for the whole going back to work thing. Maybe a little bit, but
Yeah,
like,
there's
I
there's
think
good
there's
in both scenarios, but
yeah,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I always kind of likened it to like I always thought like scientists or like inventors were really cool, and like I always wanted to do that, but I just didn't have the like smarts for it. And I feel like I get to like, you kind of get that feeling of like problem solving and stuff in 3D, or someone has a problem and then like the room of people are like, huh, and everyone's kind of like pondering how to like figure it out
yeah.
and like throwing out ideas, and it's like, oh yeah, this is like is kind of feels like we're doing something more than just like designing or like doing stuff, because it's like problem solving in a place that you're like pretty like confident in always feels like great. And I feel like that was one of my favorite things of like our little group. We had a room of
Yeah.
just like me, you, Justin, who was on the stream as well, and Simon, and you know, a problem would come up or someone would be like, I wonder like how we even do this, and like a couple people would just try to like think about it, Google it, figure it out, and
Yeah.
then like maybe someone would figure out and be like, oh wow, cool, that's awesome. And then like a lot of times it wasn't directly even related to like something we needed to
Well,
do. It was like a
the one,
brain
yeah,
break.
yeah,
Kind of.
yeah. But I love that stuff, and I do
Mm-hmm.
miss that. Like, you know, that's the reason I joined that studio, was to be part of that little hub, and it was great. Like for the very short time that lasted.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that.
Yeah,
My favorite one was the you know, trying to work out how to do that beer foam on that thing, and you were just like, okay, I've got
just a weird manic obsession with it for
this.
like like 48 hours.
Yeah, it was great though. I mean, your approach was, this is what I found so fascinating, is that your approach was so different to mine. Mine was like more of a brute. This is how I roll, I suppose. I'm more brute force. I'm like, I'm just going to make it work the way I know how, in the quickest way. You know, I'm like very much line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, roll through it and get it done. Whereas your approach, your procedural approach, was just, it was so interesting to see. But it's just not how I would have approached it. And it was, I think that's what, you know, that's what I love, is just seeing how other people will do something, because there's never a right way or a wrong way,
Right.
time constraint on it, in which case
Yeah,
there's only
in
one
which
way
way your way
to
was the right way and mine way was so much more overkill than we ever needed. But yeah, I think yeah, stuff like that, and I think that also yeah, just different ideas. There's always a million ways to do something, but it's really fun because kind of your go-to way might not in some cases be like the most proficient, and that's kind of where you like figure stuff out. Where it's like if you figured it out once, you probably just go to that way. If it like is like able to do it within the time constraint and like works out relatively well, but then someone else will just be like, oh, this is like how I've been doing it, and you're like, wow,
yeah
that's like way better, and like eliminates a couple steps of like what I was doing, and you can just pick up little bits in there, and that kind of like helps to shape you as like a just like constantly learning. I think is like, but it doesn't feel like sit down, watch tutorial, I have a new skill. It's like just soft kind of picking it up from people every day, which made it really fun to like go in. We have a question that says, how would you recommend younger artists to get the same sort of mentorship in a studio now that studios are partially or fully remote? That's an interesting one.
that's the big question, I think. Like I always bring this up. I've been bringing it up a lot recently. Like I because I went into the studio for like we did a full day for the first time in a while on Thursday, and it was so fun. Like it was great. I loved it. But then I also appreciate being at home and not doing that commute and getting more done. Like I'm more productive at home. Let's be honest. There's less distractions, but it's yeah. I mean, how do they do that? What's your take, Isaac? What do you
I
reckon?
feel like which might not be like a fun answer, is that like it also might just be like part of the times. Like I just feel like that kind of story, or also part of like location, is like I feel like I hear a lot of kind of stories like similar to yours of like I started here at like this, and I was like mentored, brought up, and like I got here, and I stayed at a studio for like X amount of like a decent chunk of time, and that's like similar to a lot of other artists and people that I know in the UK, that were like a little bit before like or like similar years to you. And it's just not the same story that I've heard from a lot of places in the US, unfortunately. I don't know why that is, and I feel like it might be just be a generational thing of like some people just back then it was like a lot more understood that they could like mold an employee into someone that they would like keep around a long time and like be able to mentor, and it was like a lot more important then. I mean, you kind of hear similar things to like longer term stays at places was more common, and now it's like a lot of like people are not afraid to jump a year after somewhere to get a better job, and companies are aware of that, so it's like kind of this weird battle of like that's great for people to be able to jump jobs and like not feel bad about it, but it's also employers are aware that like they're probably not going to get someone for 10-15 years to like mold, so they stop doing it. I don't know if that's like a case, but I feel like I haven't heard like many places currently, especially like the huge rise in freelancing is like there's just less of a we're going to build out a huge in-house team, and it's going to be stocked to the brim of like specialized people in different areas. We're going to have like a senior, a mid, a junior, this. It's kind of like, hey, we can hire anybody at any level to fill this thing for this time, and then like we let them go. So I don't know. I just that's kind of my take. Do you feel like you've kind of had the similar like observations in that kind of field?
100%, man. I feel like I was quite shocked when I came to New York, and I guess the average time that people spend at an agency was nowhere near what I was used to. I mean, to be fair, I was guilt as soon as I got here. I was only at the first studio for a year before I moved,
It
but
infected
that's
you.
on
You
it
felt
did.
it,
I
yeah.
still carry that with me. That's on me though. But it was. I mean, yeah. I mean, not just like the mentoring. It's also I'm going to use that word, culture. I think it's the people juniors miss out on if, when they're coming up, they miss out on that whole studio vibe. I can't stress how lucky I was that I was part of a studio that had very similar age people, all with very similar interests. And like in London, my entire social life revolved around work, and
Mm.
that's not like at work. I mean, it's like outside of work, we just hung out together. And I don't know how you do that like these days. I really don't. It's yeah. I mean, it could be a problem. I guess. Like, I mean, I think that people learn faster, and you learn more if you're around other people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I would always recommend being part of a studio, even if for some period of time anyway, just to see what it's like. That's possible to go in and be part of it, then great. If it ends up being remote, and if there's a way of doing some sort of weird online hangout situation just so you can see what's happening, then maybe that's a good way of doing it too. Or even just like, I don't know, taking some time just to do a bit of a share out once a week if you're part of a studio that's working remotely, just to see how people do, what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing for a start and how they're doing it.
Right.
Uh, that could be one way.
I think
I think that's
it's not exactly the same way, but I can't really. I mean, the closest I've had to that, I would say is like I just have this like fondness for the first studio that I interned at because I was there only for a small summer, but it's kind of this thing of like it sounds kind of similar to like your beginning stages at Design Bridge of like low risk on your end. Like there wasn't a ton expected of you. If you could always kind of break expectations by just like applying yourself really well and like working hard, and people were always like kind of appreciative of it because there wasn't that much you know weighing on you. It wasn't like they were like, and this intern is gonna, work at the same level as someone we're hiring full time because obviously you're getting paid less,
yeah,
hopefully paid,
yeah,
and you're
for
just kind
sure.
of soaking up stuff. And I think that it's always just put me on like great footing. I was at Imaginary Forces, and I kind of just have them like at like a great place where it's like no matter what, like I'm always excited when I get to like freelance with them. They were the first place once out of college that I like after I worked at Google for a little bit, I like went back to New York, and like first place I freelanced at as like a junior freelancer. And it's just kind of like great footing kind of to spend all that time at a studio and kind of invest in them. They invest in you, and it's like a mutual relationship. And then, later on, I've like, I'll freelance somewhere else, but I kind of like, they're just in the loop of a place that I'll like freelance just because like, the staff has changed a bit, but like there's like a lot of people there that I know, and I think that it's like really great. And it's not quite to the extent, I haven't worked in the workforce for even like 10 years. So, but just kind of that thing of I think internships are a great way to kind of get sort of that mentorship because it's low risk for them, low risk for you,
Yeah,
and high potential to like get to see how things are done, get to be like in kind of that culture, and just network really fast because you're at a place like, yeah, you go out to functions with the studio, and it's like great, now like I'm getting to hang out with these people, like I know these people, especially if you're just trying to like break into it. Like it is seems very daunting. I remember being in college in like Michigan and being like, how in the world am I ever gonna like convince a studio to like let me work for them with my like dinky little portfolio of like college projects. And it's like internships because like you kind of now have convinced a studio that you're like a good employee, and other studios will be like, oh, I know that studio, I'm sure that they'll be fine to like hire, and it kind of gets that ball rolling, and then those places also, those people from there have like broken out and work somewhere else now, and now you've like kind of infected the amount of networking you've done to different studios. Is like a great kind of added bonus, if people do kind of break up and it's not the same studio that you go back to, but now you get called from a producer's at a different studio, and they remember you. And so it's like I think that internships are, and the only way to get an internship that I found is like mass emailing a bajillion people, kind of similar
yeah,
to you of like, I have this small portfolio that I'm proud of, and you just like hope that someone opens an email and like passes you along, and you just apply to 200 places, and then I think I got 4 back from
yeah.
like
Well,
200.
yeah, yeah, absolutely spot on. That is it. I mean, I just scatterbombed like as many places as I could. But yeah, I mean that I was just lucky. But I think you get way more traction from from knowing someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you just mentioned, like the industry, well, my industry, packaging, branding, like soft advertising, if you like. It's such a small world, especially in New York. London's small, but like New York is so small. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I know at least one person at every major agency. Yeah,
Right.
and they can get you in the door. So you don't need to even have to work with them, but if you know them socially, I don't know if these things still work, but like is there Hangouts or something maybe that people can do? I don't know. But JKR are doing like they, for example, are doing an internship thing. They just started that back up again. So I think it's people like agencies and studios are recognizing that people do need to learn by doing the job, and they are paid. It's not like we're just going to get people in just to do nothing.
Hmm.
We'll get them in and they will work and they'll get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah. The person that asked that said that they sent out 70 emails, got 3 responses, and 1 internship. And yeah, very similar. Yeah, I just remember, I I also owe it to being at college, and my roommates were applying for internships, and I was like, oh yeah, I should do that. Like, it wasn't on my radar. Then I remembered that like our college course, like, it was a requirement was to take 1 internship, and I was thinking like, oh, I'll just do something local here if I like can't get one. But yeah, they were all applying for like big places, and like, one of them went to Google, one of them went to a design agency here, or studio here in New York, and I was like, oh wow, I should aim high and like apply to a bunch of places, even if I don't think I'll get in, and then you'll maybe get like a couple back. But I think
just
that's
having Google on your resume. I mean, come on.
so that's a big place. Yeah. Yeah,
that's gonna help.
and that's kind of the thing also, is that like networking once you're in the field is great, but college is also really great. At least for me, it was like networking as well. It's just like roommates that like ended up different places. Like my first job, why I contracted at Google, was my roommate was like, hey, just called me up and was like, we have a position, do you want to like have it? And I was like, yes, I would like that. And so it's just different stuff like that you like wouldn't really think of. So it's a trade-off. Obviously you can get the knowledge from college, and you could work really hard to network locally where you are the same way, but it's just kind of forces you down this path of like learning, projects, networking, and then everyone's kind of like-minded, and you're all kind of headed towards the goal all at the same time, which I feel like keeps the motivation and momentum. And that's why I was like a big fan of it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it works better these days as well because of like social media and just reaching out to people. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier to find people, like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's one way of doing it as well. If you catch someone in a good mood and they can help you out, I mean, it is honestly so much of it is just luck.
Right.
But you just need to have the talent to do the job, but you don't need necessarily be the best. You just need to be right place, right time, and then just have that just do it. Just go for it. Just be helpful,
I think
and that gets you so far.
you were kind of mentioning like you knew people at your studio, and then like they're at different studios, and that can get you in the door. And I think that speaks to like just being a good coworker, or just like a nice person at work. Not even like, you can not be as technically skilled as other people, you could not be as like good as people that you like compare yourself to, but if you're just like a generally nice person that like doesn't fumble every deadline, you're probably gonna get like job, like you'll be like well respected by your coworkers, and like they'll be like, yeah, I'll let them like get them in here, versus like you could be amazing and just not a fun person to be around, and you will not get the same opportunities, which kind of, I think I was a little bit naive of like, you thought that like if you were so good, people couldn't like they could not like recognize how good you were, but they can, and they will, and they will not want to work with you. So it's always great to like
100%.
have those social skills as well, working places, and build those up. And even I'm introverted, but like finding the small subset community at a studio that like you'll go out to drinks with, like goes a long ways in building relationships with those people, which I think was my first being freelance now for a bit, and being staff at JKR. It's just like worlds apart of like the connections, like the friendships. Like, you as a freelancer, you drop in and like you're just like hitting the ground running. You kind of like get so nice, like, oh, nice to meet you, but you're kind of just like honed in to like, especially remote, just do your job, and then like it ships, and then you're done. Whereas like as a staff person, like it's like social events, going out like every day, seeing the same people, building those relationships. And I think that that's something that a lot of people should consider before like just thinking like, oh, based on like pay or hours, that's like which one you want to do, I think that you were right in saying just try staff at a studio if you can for like a year at minimum, and like see how you like it. And then if you want to go do other stuff, do that. But I think that everyone should try to be staff for a bit, and
100%.
before they
Yeah.
write it off and be like, I'm going to go be freelance immediately. It's like, you just try it for a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always fun. I think we should probably point that out. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
it's not always amazing.
Right.
It goes up and down. It's waves, but
Yeah.
you have to pick your moments, and then when you get like a good day, take it.
Hmm.
It's great.
Yeah. I think that that's big. I think that, yeah, a lot of when I was looking at studios was purely based on like what work do they do, and then like how well are they known, and where are they located. We're like my three big things, but like
Right.
there's definitely all these other things once you start to get into places that are like affecting your ideas of like where you should work, and different stuff like that. I think the hardest one is like if you want to go do different work, but the place you are at will never get that work. It's like, well, that will never change. Like a design agency will never really work on like a Marvel film. That's just not going to happen. So like if that's like an urge of yours, you have to switch. But like I think for a lot of cases, like you can kind of also kind of learn inside and like pick up different stuff inside the studio, and kind of, especially with the team smaller, gear it towards like your interests. I think that was something that was really interesting to figure out, is like you do have a say kind of in like different avenues, because sometimes they'll look to your team as like a source of like, what should we be moving, where should we be going, what should we be adding, but not always. But I think that was a cool part, is like you get to build up a team, whereas a freelancer, you will not get that opportunity. You're there to work and do a specific task, and then you are done. But I think that was a thing I didn't expect to get. We have another question that says, it also helps to understand how a studio works internally, so you have reference point for when you freelance, pay schedule, hierarchy, culture. Yeah, it would be very daunting to be a freelancer and not know any of that, jumping right into kind of studios. And it helps you get up to speed quicker, I think, like knowing who to ask, who not to ask, so you're not doing this like chasing game of like, for some reason, asking a designer thing that should go to a producer for like deadlines and different things like that. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. What have you thought? I've always kind of curious of this, because you work with freelancers as like a staff person, and you kind of, I remember like when we were working together, like we would definitely get freelancers like passed to us from producers, like yes, no, like do you want this person to come in? I think it's interesting to kind of to pick your brain, like what do you see as like freelancers coming in to help and supplement different stuff in a studio space? What do you kind of like look for? What are things that like stick out to you from like a portfolio? Any kind of insights on that, or not really? You just, someone else
Uh,
picks it.
no, I do generally get to choose these days, which is very helpful. But then I have a very small pool of freelancers who I kind of trust.
Mm,
It's the same old thing, I guess, is that once you've worked with someone, you kind of know what their skill set is and what they can handle. If I know someone is a safe pair of hands doing something, then I'll take them.
mm.
Um, I mean, I still use a couple of freelancers of people that I knew in the UK, just because I know what they're like. I mean, maybe that's not the ideal scenario, but like it can be hard to find new people,
Mm.
and trust them
It is a
straight
big
off the
risk,
bat.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just
Uh,
hoping that you hit a deadline because you like kind of gambled on somebody. And it's like
yeah.
it's a weird tension sometimes between studios and freelancers, where
Yeah.
it looks like you could do stuff, but then maybe you can't, and then it's like, oh no.
I mean, that does happen. I mean,
Hmm.
software. I mean, if you look at, I will, if someone doesn't use Cinema or Octane or Redshift or whatever, then I probably would. I don't want to not use them. I mean, but then if that job changes at some point down the line, I can't take their file and change it. So it kind of has to be in the realms of stuff that I know. I know that's probably not very fair, but you know,
I mean,
it,
it's also studios like don't really
yeah,
want like. I mean, I know there's a huge debate always like Blender is like definitely usable. It's like 100%. It absolutely is. It's a great piece of software, but like when you're a studio, I mean, Blender's free, so it's kind of an outlier in this argument. I guess probably a bad example, but like they want to use you to use the things that they have paid for the whole studio to run on, especially if they're a big pipeline. So if you're not kind of using those tools, then it's like you could be great, but you might just be passed over purely because they look at what you've listed. It's not what their artist list, and then it will be a big kind of mess to take over files when you leave, that sort of thing. It's I think a big
Absolutely, yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, so the jobs I work on, I mean, they're very fast paced, but they do tend to change and they can run. I mean, they're not always the same bits, but the jobs do grow and evolve, and you could be working on the same thing for a year. And if I have a freelancer come in halfway through and they can't pick up my file, or they start the file and then I can't pick it up, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's good to know a bit of everything, and I do try and learn as much as I can, but I probably wouldn't take someone if someone was just working exclusively in Maya or something, then I'm out. I don't know.
It's done. It's not even gonna.
Yeah, can't entertain this. I'm out.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that's always a case by case basis, which means that you could
Sure.
like look for studios that do use the tools that you use. It just means that like kind of you cast a wide net based on the things that you use, and that's kind of I think what's geared a lot of like there's stuff you learn personally, but then there's like things you're like, this I can cast a even bigger net if I add this to my tool set, because I know a lot of people use this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do try and learn. Like I say, I'm trying to learn as much as I can constantly, so that I'm always trying to pick up new things. So I mean, I work with some very talented people who are using X particles right now, and I'm trying to keep up with all that stuff. And, it's just little things that I'm trying to get all these plugins, and it's just constantly moving. Like it's very hard just to stay on top of all of the software all the time. So
Especially because like fast-paced environment, like you just kind of have to lean back on the things that you know are tried and true, and it's hard when you're like also trying to like add in new things, and like you're like, I could use that, I think, and it's definitely better, but I have to get this done in 30 minutes. So as much fun as it would be to like try my hand at that thing I watched 1 hour tutorial on, I'm gonna have to rely on things that I've known for 10 years.
yeah,
I definitely have that thing where it's like I have it kind of halts a lot of progress sometimes, where you're just like, I've been running and gunning for like 3 months and like completely forgot that like little bit of progress I made on that one thing. And then you just kind of have to loop back, which is I think an understated thing for a lot of people. Just like, I don't know if that's like familiar in other industries, where it's like my off time is learning things to hopefully speed up my on like work hour things so that I can have better like output, where it's like, I don't know, graphic design is like definitely things you can learn, but it's like there's like kind of the things that you like, the software you use, and like you get really good at it. It's like, we will use this for the next 10 years. There's like not a plugin, but maybe I'm wrong and I don't know that, but it seems like 3D is always just hammered with constant plugins, softwares. It's like, this will speed up your workflow by 10 times if you can learn it and like consistently use it. It's like, oh, okay,
sure.
that's a big
Yeah.
thing to kind of get over.
Yeah, I mean, there are things like, Octane, for example, has sped up my workflow 50 times. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so much faster than I was 10 years ago.
Right.
But that's because technology has moved on and is just quicker. But also, if I have to make something in 30 minutes, I'm not going to try and do some sort of really complicated liquid sim. I'm going to brute force it the way
Right.
that I know how, real quick,
Mm-hmm.
and make it work. So you have to kind of pick the weapon. But then on the side, I think there is a lot to be said for trying to learn new bits, and that's why every now and again I try and take on these little side projects and do little bits and pieces where I can learn something new. I think if you sit still, you are going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as scary as that sounds, you just think about how much stuff's moved on in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Last, I mean, what, 5 years? I just look back
Right.
at like, yeah, like what I was doing at college when I was like, this is like great, like this is very good, this is a good workflow, and it's like to now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I
Yeah.
remember like being really proud with how well I knew physical render inside and out, and I'm like, could not render anything with that at the moment. Like I just
Right.
immediately dumps from like my knowledge, and then it's like all replaced with like new current things. where I was
Hmm.
like for sure that that would be what I was going to be using when I went into the workforce. And between graduating and like landing at a studio to do that stuff, it was gone. Like I was like using Octane at that time. It's like, oh wow, this is just insane how quickly this moves like year to year. People are saying encourage producers, client management to work in R&D and timelines. That does sound very fun. And I remember definitely telling people about that. But a lot of times it's just like that's the first to go, where it's like, ah, oh, we have to extend this. What can we snip out of like our predetermined timeline? Oh, R&D, you guys know how to do this. Just roll that out the window. Gives us an extra week. Awesome. It's like, okay, yeah. It's I think it's always like intended to be in, put into the timeline, and then it's just immediately just like the first thing to go is R&D. But yeah, I think that's a very poignant thing. Is that yeah, learning is needed, but also very hard to find time to do when you're like just constantly slammed with current tasks.
Yeah,
But
and I like like I said, I try and do stuff when I can, like little side projects and 36 days of type or whatever, and try and learn something else. Like I tried to learn, I kind of got my head into Redshift, and I was like, I'm going to learn this because we're picking up more files that people are doing in Redshift. So I'm like,
mm,
okay, I need to know how this works, and then I'll try that, and then I'll try and integrate some ZBrush into it, or I know I tried to do Substance for a minute there, and I was like, I could work this into my workflow, but I'm like, oh, I don't have time for this. I can't do this.
even I
Uh,
mean I took time to like learn it inside and out. It's like even in production, like sometimes it's just like that's just not like a viable route. It's just like just brute force it inside of like triplanar and stuff. Like we don't
sure,
have time
yeah.
for you to like UV, unwrap, export, import, paint, take it out, export, put it back in. It's like, yeah, I'm sure if I was working on something that like just but or time wise, like I just knew that like I've worked on projects. I left JKR where a lot of projects were, 1 week, 2 week, maybe got a 3 weeker, but a lot of times it was like in that 1 to 2, and
You
it's
got a
just
3 week
not.
project?
I think so. Well, I mean, on and off. It'd come in and then like
Yeah,
you'd
yeah.
get it for 2 days, and then it'd come back out. But like the deadline was floating 3 weeks out. But then like I went on something that was like this is gonna take 6 months, and I was like, oh wow, like I can use Substance. I can like thoroughly think out how I'm gonna build this thing, and it's like it's just based
Hmm.
on the projects a lot of times. Like yeah, even if you do know it, it's also sometimes not the most viable way. Like even if you know it inside and out, you just gotta go
Yeah.
with like the timeline you're given. Um, and stuff like that, where I think
That's
that
a
that's always great to
slightly,
like be attempting to learn stuff, because then you just have a wider arsenal of like ways to attack a project that comes in, which means it's like great like that you can know like, oh, I'm given more time, I could execute this a lot better in Substance, but we don't have the time for it, so I'm going to do it the way I know it. I think that that's like kind of the thing is like you don't always have to be learning, but attempting to learn or like learning in bits will over time give you more knowledge than being like, I just don't have time, I'm not going to even try to learn anything. And then at the end of it you haven't learned anything over like a year. But how have you found Redshift going from like a big heavy daily Octane user?
I like it. I mean, I've got my head around it now. The thing that really freed me was a lot of the settings. I mean, there's more settings.
Mm.
So I had to go back and try and work out what, all the
You're going
GI
from two
settings, all,
settings to
yeah,
like three
yeah, yeah,
tab, like a bunch
yeah,
of stuff.
all that stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's super good, like nice and powerful. I love, it works very well. It crashes a lot less.
it
Although Octane's
does.
not terrible anymore, like it's not as bad as it was, but it's still not as stable as Redshift.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I liked it. I mean, I did a bunch of renders that came out really nicely. I mean, it's really good for glass. Um, the refractive stuff is pretty amazing.
Caustics, just like
Caustics, yeah,
bam, they're there, and you're just like,
right.
wow, that's unbelievably fast for.
Yeah, all that stuff, great. But like, I don't know, there's something, once you're comfortable in something, and also, I work with, two other guys that I work with who also use Octane, predominantly Octane. So it just kind of made sense to stay in it. And our London studio also uses Octane. So everything is kind of in that area. But, just dipping my toes into it, I liked it.
I
Um,
found that I
it
was always chasing the like, yeah, I was most comfortable in Octane, and I was always like
mm,
chasing the like look that I knew I could like consistently get in Octane. I just had to be like, it's just gonna look slightly different. Like it's just not gonna look that it's not gonna be a 1-to-1. I'm gonna use it in a different way.
sure.
And I found out that like I've been like heavy, almost like exclusively Redshift for about like 2 years, and then like Octane had made major updates, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to like flip back and like learn new stuff in Octane. It's like, oh my gosh, there's never winning. You're never gonna know both of them equally. You're just like always gonna be like balancing this weird scale that's like going back and forth as new ones make new updates, and like volume stuff in Octane when I left was almost undoable in motion, and then I came back and there was like AI stuff, and I was like, what is going on here? This is light years. It's like all the stuff that I wish it had. So now I have to go back and relearn Octane from all the
There you
new
go,
updates.
man.
But
That's what I mean. Everything moves on that quickly that you have to try and keep up with everything. It's not easy.
yeah, it's a good problem
And
to have. We're
yeah, sure, sure,
constantly
sure.
pushing forward, constantly like, always doubling speeds, whereas I would have that versus stagnant stuff where you're just like begging for updates or new versions to come out of things.
Yeah. I mean, like I've just said, I just kind of wish it was slightly more stable because it does
Yeah,
crash a lot.
it
But,
does.
that aside, I can make it work. I have some workarounds and stuff. I found its
Autosave every
limits.
minute, just
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Well, for me, it's my cards. I just don't have enough
Mm.
VRAM, and I constantly crash it because I'm putting too big of textures into it. But that's my fault. I got
That's yeah. You should have known. You should have known
I
that
should have known.
you gotta do those weird workarounds of like
Yeah.
pausing, update. Yeah, that I was also because I have like a 3090 and like a 1080, and I was doing something, and like I accidentally did something that updated like 20 textures at once, crashed it. I was like, "Are you kidding? Like it has 20 gigabytes of VRAM. How did you crash it?" But that was on me. I was like, I shouldn't have done that because I knew
Just
that
filling
would.
it with 8K textures.
Yeah,
Just
I
too
probably
much.
was. I mean, it's just going
Yeah.
like crazy because like I think that that's also the thing is that you forget kind of how you were working, and then like someone tells you that it's going to be faster. You're like, okay, I'll just immediately full throttle it as hard as I can. It's like, oh, I had a crash. It's like because you went insane. Like you were throwing everything you could at it, and then like cloning stuff all over the place, and then you were like surprised that it crashed. It's like that's pretty, at least it's kind of stuff you can like learn as you use it. You'd be like, I should not do that because I know that it will crash. I'll just like
Yeah.
kind of subvert around it. But I think, yeah, I don't think I've really crashed Redshift more than like maybe 5 times ever. Where I was doing things that were, I was like, that's understandable. I understand why you. That was
Yeah.
pushing that a little bit too hard. Oh wow, time has flown. I guess this is the one that you were preparing for. But
Go on,
do you
I've
have
got it written
any
down.
Everest project that you or dream project that you've like always wanted to work on?
Hmm.
Anything like that?
It's still tricky, man. There's nothing I can think of. Like
Hmm.
it's,
You're
I feel
completely
very
satisfied
fortunate.
creatively. That's great. That's like the
I,
dream.
I mean, I am and I aren't, and I'm not. Like, I get to work on a whole bunch of stuff. I kind of my favorite projects, I will say, are the ones where I'm gonna keep hammering this home, but like the ones where it's not just me, it's part of a team. And I'm very lucky that I work with a bunch of people who are great at what they do. And I feel like the only thing that we haven't really done properly is maybe like most of the stuff I do is static.
Hmm.
So I feel like maybe there should be a bit of animation, 3D animation that should come into my portfolio a little bit more. So I would say that anything in the next year or so where I can involve like the whole team, and if it's a very nicely put together, produced moving image piece with music that's nicely edited, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
It's just one thing that I don't really ever get opportunity to do. I think I should probably try.
Yeah. Always slammed doing the other stuff, and it's like, yeah, like why would you're always there's just no room for it's like, wow, Matt's free. What could we have him do? It's like constantly booked up.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing loads of food recently as well, which has been
Mm.
super interesting, really different. I mean, to go from like, years of just doing bottles and cans and packaging visuals and, just that kind of thing, just to start getting into the like food and like, just playing with different materials, close-up stuff with materials and just using subsurface in different ways. It's
Mm.
been super fun. So that's
Yeah.
been great.
Yeah.
So hopefully
Food
I can
always
post some of that
terrified
soon.
me. I was always
Yeah, no,
terrified of it.
I've really enjoyed it, but I think you have to pick and choose what you can do. I think there are things that are probably slightly, not worth doing. But if you find the right product and the right project, and you don't have time for a photographer, and stuff's going to change, then why not jump in?
Yeah. Yeah. Any upcoming stuff? I know that you consistently will do the 36 days of type. Anything else
That,
that you
that
tinkering with,
kill
like side
that
projects?
kills me every year.
I think
I
it's
might have to
great
say,
because I'm always excited because I'm like he will do like some stuff, like you'll do some stuff, but then I'm like I know that 36 days of type is coming around. It's like you're big. It's like you're like a marathon runner that like trains the rest of the year and then like does this insane amount of like heavy lifting for a month and then like trains and takes a break and trains for the rest of the year. I think it's an
it is
interesting one.
outrageous because you're doing work and then you're doing more work, and it's just like, but I mean, like, it's important I try and learn something while doing it. I mean, there
Mm,
was a few this year where I was just phoning it in because I was just running out of time.
right.
But there's if you can learn something while doing that stuff, then great. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do a little project with my friend James, who actually works at Design Bridge. There we go, small world.
Mm,
Just to bring it round full circle. So he is the motion design director over there, and we're going to try and do a little moving image project.
nice.
But it is very loose at the moment, so hopefully we'll try and get some time in to pull that together.
Cool.
I need to try and set myself a deadline, otherwise I know it's just going to keep rolling.
Yeah, just can go forever. It's like yeah. I am the worst with that. I'm just like I set deadlines for myself,
You,
but there's never really
you've been you've been talking about doing a short for some time now. I know you.
sometime as in like 5 years. The problem is I've been talking about doing like about 6 different shorts the entire time. I'm like just keep shelving them because someone will be like it's great to like work on multiple projects and you can shelf them and pick up a new one, but I've just kind of put them all on the shelf and just not touched any of them, which is not good.
Is that because you're too busy at work, or is it because you don't want to do work after work?
It's mostly work after work,
Yeah.
especially work from home. I was like
Mm,
super productive. Like I was so inspired to do stuff like after work because like I had this like nice setup. Like I didn't have any commute. I was like I have so much time. But then after doing like 10 hours in this one room, I'm like the last thing I want to do is be in this room more. And so I immediately just like run into the living room and try not to look at this screen for until the morning. That's been like most of it. But yeah, just mostly burnt out after work, which is great because it means that like my brain is being used at work. I feel like I did a ton of side projects when like I just wasn't really that like challenged like or like
mhm.
using much at work. And so it's I guess a good thing because it means that I'm like using all of my creative juices and like brain power during the workday. But yeah, mostly burnt out. But
Yeah.
um,
No, I get that. Last year was
eventually,
tough. Like, I mean,
yeah.
as a freelancer, you're probably more used to it. But like last year, I was working from my bedroom
Mm,
until I moved into this place because I was literally next to my bed
yeah,
for a year, and it was just not good for me. It was
yeah,
not fun. So natural light, bit more space, different rooms helps.
yeah.
It's a win.
Um, yeah, eventually, maybe. But also, I've kind of the maybe healthy but maybe unproductive part of me was like, also, you owe nobody anything. I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. Like it seems like we should always be doing stuff, but at the same time, I'm like, or maybe I just don't for like 5 years, and then
Yeah.
maybe I started up again. I was like, there's so much time to do stuff where it seems so urgent or so necessary to keep like doing these things, which it is. I think that like I definitely feel when I'm like kind of like we were saying, like not learning anything. I was like, oh, I feel like pretty plateaued, and I'm like not excited about stuff, and then I'll kind of get motivation. But at the same time, you owe nobody anything outside of your job, artists. So don't feel pressured to do anything, but also don't, I guess, get lazy. Fun balance there. A good balance. But I think that's everything that we can go over. I'm excited for a project from you. Everyone can keep up with you. Your @ is on the screen at Matt Brown 01 3D. Is there another Matt Brown that you couldn't grab? Why is it 01 3D?
I think it was taken. I'm not sure. It's been there a while. It's an
Really,
old
Matt
version,
with
I think.
one T was taken?
I think so. There's a few
Surprising.
of them. There's a
Wow.
few of them. I've met two of them actually.
Hmm.
So
Got our own little club going on.
yeah, right.
Cool. Well, this was super fun. Thanks for stopping by.
No, thanks for
Uh,
having me. This has been great.
yeah, for everyone, this if you came in late, this will be up on YouTube later this week. And yeah, awesome. I'll catch you around. See you, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.